collect information on hate crimes? Because for several reasons. One is because of the consequences of hate crimes. For example, when hate crimes are compared to regular crimes, they are more likely to be violent, more likely to be more brutal, and also these crimes create a fear in the targeted minority group, and it really undermines the community cohesiveness of those groups. There's a tendency, in other words, for hate crime offenders to simply use more extreme violence against their victims and go beyond what is required to simply subdue the victim. Hate crimes often cause the victim, the direct victim of the attack, to suffer from psychological distress, such as depression, anxiety, lack of concentration, and they'll also sort of relive the incident or sort of unintentionally rethink about an incident. Research comparing hate crimes to non-hate crime victims find that hate crimes victims are significantly more likely to be fearful, expect to be targeted for additional victimizations, and are less comfortable visiting the area where they're victimized. Hate crime victims are also more likely to have employment problems, suffer from health issues, and also have difficulties overcoming the victimization. Some hate crime victims are more likely to suffer from post-traumatic stress disorder compared to other types of victims. Hate crimes may increase fear within the victim's family, but also in their community, and also lead them to experience the negative, all the negative consequences that have been outlined so far. It's apparent that hate crimes can impact the spatial mobility of members of the targeted community as well. Individuals restrict their everyday movements to only those environments where they feel safe, and these reactions could undermine community cohesiveness and also strain sort of the links, the ties between police and the community. A second reason why it's important to study hate crime is we still don't know enough about it because of a lack of good data. Empirical research and sort of evaluations of the current state of hate crime research highlights several limitations in the current body of research, and one of the critical limitations is there's not enough empirical data, systematically collected information. There's also problems with definitions, that is definitional variation across studies, so that being able to sort of pull it all together to make some general conclusions about hate crimes is very difficult. Also, because of some of the issues we talked about regarding consequences, hate crime victims are known to underreport their victimization. So most studies that look at hate crimes rely primarily on police data, but we know that because a large majority of hate crimes don't report their crime to police departments, there's a large sort of dark figure of understanding about hate crime victimization as well as hate crime offenders. There's very little information that is collected by national data collection efforts, which really undermines the ability to have a sort of broad understanding of the scope of the problem and how it varies geographically. The last reason why it's important to study hate crimes is that there's simply a limited understanding of hate crime offenders. That is, in response to a lot of these problems about data collection, especially limitations with the Uniform Crime Reports, most of the research, empirical research on hate crimes, is focused on a single jurisdiction, collecting data from a particular individual police department to study offenders. These data usually contain information about the demographic characteristics of hate crime offenders, as well as the criminal history of those offenders, as well as some additional detail about the number of perpetrators who participated in a particular action, as well as some information about motive in terms of why they committed the hate crime. While these data provide more details about offenders than other sources like the Uniform Crime Reports, they lack theoretically relevant information. For example, most police files do not record socioeconomic status, do not include employment information about the offender, and certainly do not include information about education characteristics of the offenders, nor do they contain information about the relationships, the social relationships of the offender, as well as life-related events, life course events that shape their beliefs as well as their behaviors. Moreover, although there are case-specific and specific examples of cities where we have decent hate crime data from those places, it really usually just focuses on a very small sample of offenders in a particular geographic region.